Uh,
And
So welcome everybody to today's webinar. So you got a new award. This webinar is sponsored by the College of Education and Human Ecology. This information is, the examples are from the college, but they really are, it's not specific to EHE. Anybody can watch this webinar and get some really important information. Michael Moses is our grants and contract specialist in the college, and he is going to lead the presentation today. If you have any questions, please just put them in the chat, and I will be the facilitator. And I don't know if I introduced myself. I'm Kim Lytle. I'm the Assistant Dean for Research in the College of Education and Human Ecology, and you can always get a hold of me at lightle.16@osu.edu. So thanks again, Michael, and please take us away.
okay, thanks so much, Kim. And thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you get a lot out of this webinar. I'm sure some of you have had many grants here at OSU, and some of you are just getting or seeking your first. This webinar may appear to be geared toward the newer PIs, but it serves as a good refresher as well. This webinar is also reflective of some changes in EHE Office of Research, most notably our new Assistant Dean for Research, Natasha Slesnik, and we have some new web content. This is from the intranet, so this view here is behind a firewall, but we also have much of the same content in a public-facing mode. um, so yeah, we're keeping up with new faces and developments in our own office at OSP. There are some big changes coming at OSP, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But thanks once again for participating, because it shows that you're making an effort to keep up with changes and revisions to our office and policies. All right. So again, this is a summary of our web resources for post-award support. There's much more to our website. I encourage you to peruse it thoroughly when you have time. For now, we're going to go right into the objectives of this webinar, and the gist of this can all be described as I'm funded. Now what? And the now what part of that pretty much boils down to project management. And project management includes managing time, money, space, people. Um, it can be quite a bit, and we'll go over a lot of it. I can't emphasize enough the importance of effective communication. Um, managing a grant or a research project basically takes a village. It is definitely a group effort, especially when you're talking about your bigger, more complicated grants. This effort is led by the PI, supported by colleagues and staff at the project, department, college, and university level. I suppose you could also say sponsor level in some way, but the focus of this webinar is what you do when you have a grant, how to get started within OSU. So together, all of these parties, department, college, PI, university, we need to initiate and see research activities through to completion. And that comes with all of the attendant financial and administrative transactions. So specifically, today's topics, as you probably saw on the registration, will consist of locating award and project info in the PI portal, spending grant funds and who can assist you with that, and knowing award terms and reporting and prior approval requirements. That's a mouthful, but we'll go into some detail here in a second. Quick word about the PI portal. You're going to hear a lot about the PI portal, and it's important to know if you haven't heard already that the PI portal has been completely revamped, and the new version will be accessible to the whole university community on October 2nd. To ease that transition, because it's kind of happening a little bit sooner than we were expecting. There's been the rumored PI portal revamp talked about for some time, but we just recently heard it's coming like basically next week. And so to ease the transition, OSP will allow access to the old PI portal through December 31st. The PI portal overhaul has been in the works for a while. Um, we here in the EHE Office of Research have not used it. We don't really know a lot of people that have used it. Um, the interface will likely be completely different. Um, Me personally, I'm counting on much of the same jargon um, to remain, but we'll see. It's going to be a learning experience for all of us. We'll learn together, and our office will surely have some tutorials in place once we become sufficiently familiar with it. Okay. All right. So locating award and project info. This is going to seem really elementary for anyone who's had a grant or two here at OSU, but this is when we refer to awards and projects, those mean different things within OSU, but these are university issued grant ID numbers. And you'll need these for constant reference when you're paying your staff, purchasing equipment or supplies, and interfacing with OSU and collaborators across the college and university. Sponsors assign their own unique grant ID numbers, and those are obviously very important too, especially in reference or in communication with the sponsor, doing progress reporting, more like the external side of managing your grant, you may be required to, um, reference different numbers. But for managing grants and spending funds within OSU, it's critical that you know your award and project numbers. Um, those are formatted um, like this. Each grant and contract is an award, and the format of the award numbers is GRT, presumably abbreviation for grant, and then an 8-digit number beginning with zeros. Awards contain at least one project, and project numbers are formatted 600 and then 5 different numbers, 8-digit number altogether. There can be awards under which there are multiple project numbers, and that can be a sponsor requirement or it can be a PI preference. Um, so an example there. Well, here's an example of what you see in the PI portal and where you locate your award and project ID numbers. Again, this is all going to change. It's all going to look very different come October 2nd, but I have not heard that they're phasing out the way they format the award and project numbers. So I expect that to remain the same. Here's a quick example of an award with multiple projects. In this case, this would be considered a sponsor requirement, as NSF requires that participant support costs are always isolated. So the budget for certain items is sometimes kept completely separate from your other items, like your salary costs and such. Um, it can just, again, this can be a sponsor requirement or a PI preference. I've seen in the PI preference scenario, you'll have a multi-PI project, and the PIs mutually agree that they would like to keep their portions of the budget separate. The sponsor may not care whatsoever. um, but the PIs sometimes do, and OSP will let us know when separate project numbers are required, and they'll also accommodate PIs when they are requested. So moving on to spending grant funds.
Michael,
Sure.
Michael, had a question from Belinda Gimbert, and she said, I've heard there will be a mandatory separate project number for each subaward under one project. Have you heard about that?
I actually have not heard about that. But yeah, that is making me very curious, and I will place a call to Amy Sanford today because, and by subaward, you're talking about a subcontract to like another university. Is that what we're referring to?
Well, I can tell you an example like, Jerry D'Agostino's, that big reading recovery grant, that I3 grant. He requested that every subaward had a separate project number because there were so many and they were so complicated. It was the only way that we could keep track of all of them. But I think that was not mandatory. He just, they just figured that it would be easier to deal with them separately, spread the money out and figure out where everything was going. So it sounds like Belinda's saying is that it's that she has heard that there will be mandatory separate project numbers.
Okay. I will definitely look into that.
Okay.
That'll be good to know ahead of time. It wouldn't surprise me if they would be encouraging that because there are so many F&A implications when it comes to subawards. The
I'm not
same
sure.
way that
Can
those.
you hear me, Michael? I unmuted my microphone. I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah. Hi, Belinda.
Hi. Hey, thanks for taking the question. I guess it
No
was a
problem.
little bit of a rude shock to me too when I discovered that our new project that we just received has been set up with each subaward being required to have a separate project number. The overall project has the same sort of format, 600, etc. But each of
Okay.
these new subawards, it doesn't matter whether they're a university or they're a non-profit or a company. And I'm not really sure. Um, I guess my bigger question is, so is this change in the PI portal related to this new Workday software that OSP is going to implement?
It
Supposedly next.
is.
Okay.
It is,
Supposedly.
and I guess one is ahead of the other because I don't know off the top of my head the schedule for implementing Workday, but the distinction is that like currently all of the information in the PI portal is input by OSP, and they use PeopleSoft. I
Right.
believe it's PeopleSoft PeopleSoft Grants, I think, and then there's a PeopleSoft Financials. It's all one big system, and it's PeopleSoft that Workday is replacing.
Right.
So it's kind of like two different things, but they're certainly intensely intertwined.
Okay.
But I do want to say that the PI portal, they have been futzing with this for years, and so I'm not sure. It wasn't like I think they were separate. Like Workday, we're going to look at that separately. We're going to replace PeopleSoft, and then PI portal. I believe that those projects started separately, but I have heard that PI portal will go away, possibly go away once Workday's in place. It's all that data is in there. It's just how it's being presented. Um, so believe me, we will have lots of training in terms of the new PI portal. Especially if OSP doesn't give us what we think we need, and but Workday, it's going to be a couple years before we see that. So, and I really do think, Belinda, having separate project numbers maybe is easier to keep track of all of those pieces and parts going that are associated with a different uh, entity. It'll be interesting to see, how you think it works, but
Yeah. Sounds like for now we're kind of at the mercy of some programmers.
yeah. And Well, yeah, Belinda, you say that, but who the heck knows? Um, but yeah, so the PI portal is the old one is going to be available through the end of the year, but from what I've heard, that it really is pretty intuitive, and that if you could find stuff in the old PI portal, which some people say they couldn't, we should still be able to find it in the new PI portal. But let's go ahead and keep going, Michael.
Okay. We're pivoting on to our second objective here, which is to address spending of grant funds and all the ins and outs of that, especially how to get off on the right foot when you have a new award. Some basic things you need to understand about grant funds is that they are temporary streams of funding, and they are from external partners or sponsors, and they are for a specific purpose. These are different from gifts, donations, development funds, etc. Um, our primary purpose from the PI right on up to the SPO and everyone in between is to be a responsible steward of sponsored funding. A critical part of being a responsible steward of sponsor funding is to understand some basic concepts such as direct costs versus indirect costs, or F&A, facilities and administration. There are truly hours and hours of webinar that could be spent on this topic due to the variety of award and grant types and the vast number of sponsors and all their different rules and regulations. The goal of this webinar with respect to spending is to emphasize key points in managing your budget and to make sure you know who can assist you. So, some more guiding principles. The sponsor approved budget should guide pretty much all financial transactions. When you first receive that notification message from OSP, from your sponsored program officer, there could be, up to that point, there could have been a cut to the budget that was in your grant proposal. And sometimes, believe it or not, it can kind of fall through the crack to the extent that, OSP notifies you that you have a grant. Of course, well before that, you'd already known that you were funded. And then, a couple months into your project, you realize, well, I don't have an exact, budget to refer to. And a lot of times that is because the budget that was attached to the PA005 and proposal was cut. There were changes along the way, and one way or the other, a line item detailed budget or the awarded amount, not the proposed amount, is suddenly nowhere to be found. So that is one thing you want to make sure you have right from the get-go. Usually you do, but like again, I've seen it happen more than once. So make sure to have that sponsor approved budget and all the attendant detail. Your budgets will probably consist mostly of personnel costs. These are the major costs on a grant. Some people say anywhere from 70 to 80% of a grant budget and grant expenditures are related to salaries, benefits, and tuition. So these need very close tracking, especially with respect to effort reporting, which we'll go into a little bit later. Another big item that takes a lot of close tracking is any funds that are budgeted to non-OSU collaborators, such as subawardees or purchase service vendors or consultants. This is money that, whereas we're bringing money, you receive a grant and money comes into the university. Well, we also send some money outside the university, and for all intents and purposes, especially where we're issuing a subaward, a collaborator, then we sort of become a sponsor in that sense too. So you have to be very
Michael,
yes.
I'm sorry, you're getting softer and softer.
Okay.
Yeah, very good. Now you're
better?
back. Yes.
I think my microphone keeps dropping down. Sorry about
I
that.
think it might.
All right. So yeah, again, non-OSU collaborators can be a big part of a budget, and that can include funding another entity and making us sort of a sponsor in certain situations. So that's something to be taken very carefully. Who can assist when spending grant funds? This is so very critical for PIs, especially newer PIs, but um, this is something you're always going to have to know because staff come and go, things change, there's mergers and all kinds of stuff. So always know who can assist you because, again, it goes back to being a group effort. In an ideal world, there are support for grants management at a number of different levels. Um, the the PI might have a project coordinator type of person, a program manager. They don't always have these positions, but if they do, then that's going to be between that person and the PI and maybe um, co-investigators. Though that's the project level um, kind of support uh, for grants management. Again, a small grant might not require this, or a department might not be staffed very well. But hopefully there are these people, and the PI can delegate some duties to them. Um, you'll always have department, fiscal, and HR staff support. These are the people that assist with entry and approval of e-requests and HR action requests, which are used. That's the system used to assign people to your grants, whether a portion of their time or fully funded on a grant. At the college level, of course, I'm here. EHE Office of Research. We are always available for any and all grant questions. Um, a lot of, we do some things a bit more than others, but we can assist with anything. We might, just find the appropriate person for you to contact. We might be able to help you directly with any number of things, so please work with us closely. Things like allowability inquiries, personnel monitoring, and tracking subaward costs. Those are just a few things we do. And then we can't forget about the EHE Service Center. Um, every time a fiscal officer submits an e-request or an HR action, there's someone in the Service Center who's, reviewing that and making corrections if necessary, and then doing the final processing of those requests. PIs sometimes, I think they often use e-request directly, and I think some maybe use HRA too for certain transactions. This is a choice and a comfort level thing. If I were a PI, I would definitely enlist help, especially when there's like a high volume of like staff salary changes. The PI delegation of such duties is pretty critical. Um, when it comes to uh, HRA in specific, I would definitely enlist help. Okay, so again, I want to emphasize that spending grant funds, monitoring your budget, um, ideally at least one set of eyes on project finances, which means PI portal, at each level is encouraged. And again, it may not always be the reality, but if we have people paying attention at the project level, the department level, college, and university level, then we'll be in pretty good shape. This is just a quick look at the old PI portal. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but if by chance you're a brand new PI, uh, you need to look at this PI portal financials information at least monthly. I don't know how many people do that. but it really is critical, and it can be a little bit frustrating. You see, oh, this isn't right, that's not right. But you got to remember that your grant budget is kind of a ever changing, shifting kind of thing, and it's critical to pay attention. Why is it critical? Um, Again, I've heard that grant budgets are a financial expression of the research project. I think that's a good way to put it. There's all kinds of activities happening on the ground, the actual research being done, and there's a bunch of financial transactions that follow those. The PI portal financials information can be thought of as a bank statement, sort of, for your research. You should be able to see all of the different transactions. And if you feel like the detail for those transactions is insufficient, we can always get more. We and EHE Office of Research can help with that, as well as OSP.
Michael, I'm going to stop you for a second here. We just have a few minutes, and we'll continue until you're done because the recording can go forever. But Jane has a question, and she's asking about the sequence of events between the Service Center and OSP. And that is sort of a black box, I think, to a lot of PIs, that relationship. Could you talk a little bit about what happens, like if an e-request goes in, it goes to the Service Center, and of course we know it's for the funded research, it's different than like what a normal e-request would be. Can you talk just a tiny bit about that?
I can, but I think it can be a pretty labyrinthine sort of process. It comes down to workflow. So within the PI or the fiscal officers at the department level, or in some cases myself, will enter a transaction in e-request or HRA. Whoever is entering those requests, it helps if they are, the more educated they are about grants, obviously, the better, because the service center is going to get those requests and they need to be coherent, right? So the service center can, effectively order your item or assign your staff. What the service center is not in the business of doing, although I think they get caught up in it occasionally, but they are not in the service of or in the business of verifying allowability of costs. So if you buy something on a grant, the service center is not going to be the one that is necessarily going to catch whether you should be buying that item on the grant. That is something that OSP and we here in the Office of Research can help you with. And if you have any doubt about that whatsoever, then you want to do that well before you enter that request, whatever the request may be.
So Michael, so the service center could approve a cost, a transaction, whatever it happens to be, and then that ends up going to OSP, and then at that point OSP could say, hey, this is not allowable. This is going to, this is against terms and conditions of this award, or whatever it could be, or
Correct.
this end date is beyond the end of the project. So then what happens? So does that SPO or that fiscal person at OSP then come back and talk to the service center, and then the service center talks to the PI? Jane, is that your question in terms of that communication? How does that get processed, and it's maybe not in a very timely fashion? So Michael, while she's typing, is that how it's supposed to happen? That if something is not caught by the service center, then OSP, what does OSP come back and say to the PI, I'm sorry, that's not allowable?
Correct. If something that we've entered in e-request or HRA, it makes it, the service center completes the request, the item is purchased on the grant, and then it's deemed unallowable by an accountant or by a SPO at OSP, then the SPO will notify us. And I'm not sure if there's a service center role to play there. It basically comes down to um, confirming whether the cost is in fact allowable or
Mm-hmm.
unallowable. And then if it's not, OSP will transfer the charge from the grant to a department fund. Hopefully not, but that's the end result of a disallowed cost. I hope that answers your question. I understand there's kind of probably additional questions around that topic, and I'm happy to talk on the phone or meet in person or take some emails and give you some more info on those issues.
We're also very interested in knowing any feedback so that we can make things better. And so, Jane, if you have any specifics, please get a hold of Michael or me, or and we'll see what we can do.
Thanks, Kim. Um, all right, so the last word on spending grant funds, the PI portal financials information is critical because it is the official basis for fiscal reporting from OSP to the sponsor. So if on any given day the PI portal doesn't seem accurate or seems off and transfers need to be made, corrections need to be made, get them done because what you see in the PI portal at the end of the day is going quite possibly in many cases, almost all cases, is going to be um, official record, official financial record. So we want to get it right. And then that wraps up spending and who can assist with spending. And we are now on award terms and conditions and reporting. All awards are subject to terms and conditions, and these, of course, are guided by federal, state, local, and university policy. A big concept you'll hear in grants management at OSU is sponsor prior approval, and that basically means you are there are certain situations in which you deviate from your proposal. And some of those situations the sponsor absolutely has to know about and sign off on. That's what sponsor prior approval is. Basically, we talked earlier about how we have a lot of different grants, a lot of different sponsors, a lot of different kind of rules to play by, and every grant kind of has a different set. So um, some grants will offer quite a bit of flexibility. You hear words like discretionary, and it's important to know exactly what those things mean for your award. When it comes to federal grants, the major prior approval issues are changes to the scope of work. That is always something that the sponsor must know about and approve. They are funding us to do one thing, so if we're doing another thing, they need to know about that. There might be IRB issues, and there might be, you get a year into your grant, and there might be significant changes to your project team. The PI's own time spent on the grant may need to decrease or increase for some reason. As you get to the end of a grant, more time might be necessary to complete the scope of work. And then you may also need to address issues like carryover, which is an issue that comes up when sponsors require that you separate each year of funding and account for it separately. So you basically have to close out one year of funding and then you're on to your next one. And in some cases, there might be remaining funds on an outgoing budget year to carry over onto the new budget year. Another big prior approval issue is budget revisions. Um, Most grants will allow some measure of flexibility. Some offer quite a bit of flexibility, um, but they're all different, and it's critical that you understand the terms and conditions of your award. So I would encourage every PI to involve our office and OSP. You can start with our office when it comes to gauging, is this something that really truly, needs sponsor prior approval? If it is, then we go to OSP because they are our partner in, those formal communications to our sponsors. So reach out as soon as you suspect you're kind of deviating from your plan that you put forth in your grant application. When it comes to financial matters, fiscal officers can be of assistance as well. In EHE OR, we're not, we have some accounting skills, but we're not, technically accountants by trade. So we do work pretty closely with our fiscal staff here in the college and in the departments. Progress reporting is a big part of your grant management. And the frequency and detail required in your progress reports varies tremendously, again, because we have a number of different types of grants, different sponsors, collaborators. Um, Involve our office and OSP as you need. OSP will always be the ones that have to submit the formal progress reports. These are the annual and sometimes quarterly reports required by many of our state and federal sponsors. Um, in some cases, a PI can submit a progress report and not really even notify our office or OSP. Those are usually on smaller grants from foundations. I would almost always involve either our office or OSP, preferably both when it comes to progress reporting, especially if you're not certain how, if you're new to progress reporting. Um, Effort certification is another issue that comes up inevitably in grants management, and it can be extremely tricky. So always ask for help here. Basically, faculty and staff working on sponsored projects must certify their time or effort. Um, they do this each semester. And again, this goes back to good stewardship of sponsored funds. Sponsors want you to confirm that you spent the time you pledged and you earned the salary you anticipated from the grant. There might be some flexibility, but again, kind of determining that can be a bit of a challenge. Additionally, calculating effort is pretty complicated because one sponsor wants a percentage, another sponsor wants hours, another wants calendar or person months, and that can be very complicated, especially for GRAs who are not full-time employees, um, and other types of student employees, as well as for faculty, because you have to, in some cases, consider effort in the academic year and then also in the off-duty period. And kind of counting it and rolling it all up the way the sponsors want to can be a little bit tricky. Okay, so we're over time here, and we're kind of winding down in general. Just a bit more on the role that my office plays, the things we can help with, just general project management activities. Um, Monitoring spending is a big thing I assist PIs with in unison with fiscal officers sometimes. Um, Tracking personnel, again, that takes up a lot of my time, and I've become pretty proficient in understanding salary and fringe and tuition issues over the years. Progress reporting, project closeout, effort certification, which we just touched on, and just generally liaisoning between OSP and faculty collaborators. Um, we can do a lot of different things, and depending on the PI, you know, we can help you however you need. Different PIs have different levels of experience and different needs, but you can always meet with us to determine how we can best help you with post-award activities. Part of having a grant is overseeing a stream of financial transactions, um, and even the best PIs need help. Um, there's a lot more that we can help with. This is just kind of a summary. And I will close by talking about a little bit more about the Office of Sponsored Programs. If you've had a grant, if you've submitted a grant application, you know that they are the business office or the institutional official institutional signature for grant applications and receipt of awarded funds. Um, they are they're called sponsored program officers for a reason. They are watching to make sure we are proper stewards of grant funds. Sponsored program officers, or SPOs, are assigned to all colleges and departments throughout the university and medical center. SPOs have a critical role in the research endeavor, but they can be spread pretty thin.
Michael,
Yeah.
we just lost your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Sponsor program officers are assigned to colleges throughout the university, and they play a critical role, but they are spread pretty thin often. So fortunately, in EHE, we have grant staff who can, all together, you have a good support system.
So, Michael, we have another question from Jane, and she says, does the role of our office, is it different if the project is more service versus research oriented?
Okay, good. I think I understand that question. I think that's a good question. I think the best answer to that is if it is going through OSP, then we can help you with it.
That's right. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, which is not to
So,
say we
yeah.
can't help with internally funded grants and such, but we spend a lot of time helping with the OSP funding. Almost, I don't want to say exclusively, but almost exclusively.
Yeah, and so much of what goes through OSP is not really, it's just straight research. There's lots that gets funded through there, and
Yeah.
we work with all of those PIs.
Hence the name, the Office of Sponsored Programs, and not the Office of Grants or Research Grants or something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So last year, and I think this year, we got new SPOs assigned to our college. Amy Sanford was first. She's, I think since last fall, she's been helping us. She replaced Anna Shadley. Anna still assists from time to time. She kind of has a floating schedule over at OSP now. For any industry-funded awards, which we don't have a whole lot of, but we do have some, there's a different SPO for those, and that is Maureen McCormick. I think she became our SPO just earlier this year.
So, Michael, I want to go back to Jane's question in terms
Sure.
of, so I have a question. So how do you work with centers? And I know that different colleges have different centers. We have two. They have their own grants managers embedded within those centers. But do you work with them, and can folks in centers come directly to you and ask you questions?
Yeah, absolutely. We do work directly with them. Much of my time is spent working with our three core departments. But we do, I've worked with ORC, which is, not really in existence anymore, and occasionally Crane and Schoenbaum. Um, they are, they have a good operation over there for grant support. But we all kind of at the college level, we're overseeing awards for the whole college, and occasionally, we run reports and we see, like for example, preliminary projects that have horrible looking deficits or something like that on them. So we kind of inquire about those things with the grants managers and the centers. they inquire with us about, kind of complicated grant issues. So yeah, while we are primarily kept busy with the three core departments, we're available to the whole college, including those centers.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Belinda, Jane, do you have any additional questions?
Cue the
Belinda's,
Jeopardy song.
what, Michael?
Cue the Jeopardy song.
That's right. All right. So Belinda said she has no questions. It's wonderful. Uh, so Jane, hope to hear from you and continue that conversation. Good. That sounds wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you again, Michael. Thank you for everyone that attended. We will get this recording out and the slides as in the next few days, and we'll make sure that those get out to everyone. Thanks again.
Thank you all so much, and I look forward to meeting with you, Dr. Weichel, and thanks for everyone else for attending.